welcome to Girl Bit. My name is Laura Balone Daltavila, and today we're joined by Dana Dajani. Dana is a writer, performer, and activist of Palestinian origins. Her poetry focuses on Palestinian injustice and history, along with politics and environmental issues. She has won international awards and is recognized for her poetry in love letters to Palestine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura, for having me.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, how did you initially become involved with writing poetry?
Well, poetry, I'd say, was my second love. My first love was theater. I lived in Saudi Arabia until 2003, and we left because the compound I lived on was bombed by Al-Qaeda in 2003. And we went to the States. We were evacuated out to the States, and I consumed myself with reading because that was also one of my passions growing up. But I started to realize that in addition to reading, I really needed to process through writing. And so I began to journal. And a lot of what came out was abstracted in the form of poetry. And it felt really good, and it was a way for me to comfort myself through writing. So yeah, that's kind of where it really was seated. I wrote before that, but where it became like a lifeline for me was around 2003, yeah.
Okay. And since then, Love Letters of Palestine has come out. Can you explain that project and what sort of led you to be writing about Palestine specifically?
Yeah, in 2012, I was invited to perform at a fundraiser called I Heart Dance, My Community, and it was by the Jumeirah Rotaract Club. And the benefactors of this fundraiser were Palestinians. So they told me, it's a bunch of different dance groups who are all dancing to raise money for Palestine, but we feel like we want a monologue or some poetry, so could you share something? And at that point, I didn't have anything specifically about Palestine in my repertoire, so I decided to write something, and I wrote love letters. And I felt like, when I approached the writing, I felt like in my limited experience, I didn't want to write something from my own perspective. Because at that point, I'd only been to Palestine once in the 90s, and it was so limited, my own tangible experience. So I decided to put my theatrical background to use, and I created this character of Hajj. And I wanted to tell her story of Palestine, which I felt was far more universal, accessible, and encompassed a broader timeline. And so that's how that poem came about. But I have to tell you, when I was in the sound check for the event, I hadn't quite found her voice. I was still performing the poem in Dana's voice. And one of the organizers was like, no, it's too aggressive, don't perform it. And so I just put it aside, and I performed another monologue that I'd written about my grandfather. And I literally just tore it up and was like, well, failed experiment, sucks.
Okay.
Until 2013, when I was in Palestine with a friend of mine who's a documentary filmmaker, and she said, let's film something together. Do you have something we could film here? I said, I have this poem that I wrote, but it sucks, and it's not good, and it's too aggressive, And she said, let's hear it. And so I shared it with her, and she made me perform the poem for every single person we met in Fallstin for the next 2 weeks. And by the end of the 2 weeks, I had found the character. And so it was complete, and even now, as I perform her year after year, she gets older with me, and grows on me more and more, and I discover more of the work through the character as I perform her.
That's really an amazing story, and it really shows because when you are talking and performing about Palestine, you're so soulful, yet it's still heartbreaking to watch at the same time. How do you think you can teach a global audience about Palestine through your poetry and performance art?
Well, I guess from a young age, I realized that if I want to, I can be an ambassador. I can be an ambassador for Arab, I can be an ambassador for Muslims, I can be an ambassador for Palestinians. If I want to, it's my role to step into. And so I did. I stepped into it with joy, you know. It hasn't always been joy when it comes to Palestine. There's a lot of heartbreak, as you said. And there are some times when I'm performing the poem and there's been like a bombing or specifically an attack, you know, where I can't even make it through half the poem, where I start crying while performing. And it's not the character, it's Dana who's really heartbroken. And still, you know, I try and look at the subject of Palestine from as many different perspectives as I can. And I don't know if you've seen I Choose to Be Palestinian, but that's another one of my Palestinian pieces. And that came about because I was acting in a film with other Jordanian and Palestinian actresses. And I wondered how I would be referred to, because I have a Jordanian nationality. But Dajani is a Palestinian family from Jerusalem. So I wondered how they would refer to me, as a Palestinian actress or a Jordanian actress. And I started to go through this process of like, would I be insulting, you know, Jordan if I say, no, please write about me as a Palestinian actress because I didn't choose to be Jordanian, you know, but I choose to be Palestinian. And so that's how that poem came about, as like an affirmation to myself that no, this is the identity that I choose. Nobody has the ability to tell me you are or you aren't just because I have or don't have a piece of paper, an identity. I claim that identity myself.
No, that's very powerful. And that has shown through your work. You've been in international festivals and in Global Citizen. What is the impact that you're hoping to have through your performance art?
I think that poetry is a very powerful tool because it has the ability to speak to the heart. It has the ability to bypass all of our logic and our thinking brain and really just speak to the heart. And for me, that's where empathy is born, you know, and understanding and consideration and mutuality. It comes from that space. So through my poems, I hope to connect with other people heart to heart and dissolve the boundary of separation and create understanding.
Yeah, I think that's so true, that if a person is able to see it or hear it through performance art or in other ways, then they're more able to feel it and have empathy for Palestinians or any group of people in the world. So definitely agree.
We tend to like want to argue with an opinion, but a poem transmits an experience and a feeling, and so that's what is transmitted. Is I can't argue with that feeling because I felt it a little bit. That's what was transmitted in the poem. And so yeah, that's why I don't do essays as much, although I do think in, you know, prose at times. I feel like I can relay a thought better in a structured, argumentative kind of essay format. But why? If somebody's made up their mind and I can open their heart instead, it's a transformation that happens like from the inside out.
Right. I think anywhere in the world, it's hard being an artist. Is there anything though that you want to share with Arab artists in the region about pursuing their dreams?
It's funny because like 10 years ago, we were in a different state. We didn't have TikTok and like social media was way calmed down. It seems like now everyone's a performer and that's okay. You know, like everyone's on camera and that's okay. But 10 years ago and 20 years ago, I felt like it was much more of a stigma. There was a lot more pushback, especially from the older generation, to accept that the youth might want to be more you know, progressive, performative, creative. My parents in particular were like, oh, there's no honor in being an actress, you know, you're great at math, be an engineer, you're good with language, be a translator. But nothing gave me the sensation that I had of being on stage and having that connection to community and also taking on a persona and a character and coming in and out of that was really gratifying for me. So I feel like now there may be, you know, more acceptance to go into that path. But then what I would say is find out what you love to do and do it. Don't follow the herd. You know, even for me stepping into poetry, one of the things that I didn't really like about the spoken word genre is that everything sounded really homogenous. It was like that Sarah Kay's voice was echoed in the spoken word poet in Argentina and the spoken word poet in New Zealand and the spoken word poet in Japan, and it's like, why does everyone sound white? I wanted to hear people's personality and their character and their experience expressed through their poetry, and so that's why I turned to the character to be able to play more within that genre. And I think that's what surprises people about my work, is that, oh, I haven't seen anything quite like that before. And so I really encourage people to find what it is that, like the two worlds, where their two worlds collide, or their three interests collide, wherever that is, that's where you're gonna make something that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, actually I can relate to that, because when I saw your videos and your work, I was like, wow, I haven't heard something like that before, and it was really powerful. So thank you, and I hope that you continue. Do you have upcoming projects that you're working on currently, or?
So the Spiral Sessions is launching now in November.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and it's open to individuals to join, and later we'll be opening it up to organizations to also, if the organization itself wants to bring its team in to work through any of those topics.
Well, that sounds like super interesting work, and we'll definitely have to check it out in the upcoming month and everything. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us, and make sure to keep an eye out for Dana. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.